Hello, I'm Guy in the Azure Compute Core Platform team, and in this video I'm going to show you a new feature that we're working on that's currently in preview. It's the ability to attach and detach a disk to and from a VM in an Azure VM scale set. Up until now you could define attached data disks for a VM scale set, but you had to define it at a VM scale set model level. So if you added a disk, it would be a raw disk added to every VM in the scale set. With this new feature, you can actually do a put on an individual VM, and you can attach a disk. It could be pre-initialized with data or not, and you can attach a disk to a specific VM. You can detach that disk. You can go and attach it to another VM. So it really fills a gap in terms of functionality between VMs in scale sets and VMs in availability sets, for example. So let's get started. Here's the portal. Here's a resource group, and I've defined a disk here. It's called disk float, and I also have a VM scale set. Let's look at this scale set. So in this scale set, I've just got two instances, and I'm really going to mostly work with one of these instances. If I go back to the resource group, let's look at this disk as well. So if I look at this disk that I've defined, it's basically a standard disk in 20 GB. So now let's look at the first VM in this scale set. So I'm going to RDP into this. It's a Windows VM, and here are the disks currently defined. So there's disk 0, the C drive, 127 GB, and disk 1, the temporary drive, 50 GB. So that's all that's there at the moment. So now let's try attaching that disk that we saw in the this disk float disk. So to do that, I'm going to use the Azure Cloud Shell, and I have a script called attach. Let's take a look at that. So this disk, it calls a Python program because right now the only functionality is available in Azure REST calls. So I have a Python program called disk CLI, which will just make the appropriate REST call to go and attach a disk. So I'm specifying the scale set name, the resource group name, the operation attach, the VM number, in this case VM number 1, and the LUN number that I want to attach to, which is LUN2, and the name I'm giving to the disk. I'll call it disk float. So let's run that. If it runs successfully, it just returns the JSON definition of the scale set just to show that it worked. But a better way to see that it works is to RDP to this machine, and now you can see there's this disk. It's called my floating disk, and it's now listed as disk 2 on this machine. Let's also go into File Manager. Let's not just trust the disk manager. Let's go to the File Manager and see what's there. So if we look here, we can see there's this new disk, my floating disk, and it looks like it was pre-initialized, so there's a file on it. Let's take a look. Hello, I'm a working demo of a VM level attached disk. That's great, so everything worked. Now suppose I want to attach this to another VM, so then I'll need to detach this first, so let's detach that. I'll go back to my scripts. I've got this script, and let's look at the detach script. So I'm calling this same Python program, and in this case it's the same, except the operation I'm going to call this detach, and I'm not going to give it a disk name. I'm just going to detach whatever it is on LUN2. So let's call that. So when I run that, I'll go back to my RDP session, and the disk is gone. So that's a quick summary of this new feature. There's a lot of things you can build on top of a feature like this. Azure Container Service with Kubernetes. Now Kubernetes can use VM scale sets with this feature, and therefore it'll become much easier to do things like auto scale, scale in, scale out, things like that. And there's other PaaS services that can also make good use of this. And it's really closing the gap between regular VMs and VMs in VM scale sets. There isn't really much difference in functionality at all now, so you can build applications directly on top of scale sets and then be able to make use of all the scalability, elastic scale, auto scale that you then get with scale sets. All right, thanks for watching.